So at this point, I think I want to give a little background on what we're talking about today, which is police data transparency. So police data transparency is a movement that's starting to happen across the country and only arrived in Asheville very recently. It's a component of 21st century policing. It expands upon both the city's existing open data and equity efforts and allows us to measure outcomes. It builds trust through a commitment to transparency and accountability. And also, our request was not just for data, but also for information about how the police department operates. So that includes their policy manual, the forms they fill out, so we know what data exists. This also allows us to have some independent verification because to this point, all APD data that we had came in the annual professional standards report. So if an incident happened today, we wouldn't learn about it until next February. And also it saves staff time because they don't have to fulfill all of these difficult public records requests.
So we put together a petition. It was last year in response to an assault on Mr. Johnny Rush on behalf of a APD police officer. So our response was to increasing the accountability and transparency of our local police department in Asheville. So we felt the best way to do that as Code for Asheville was to go through the public policy and public process, and we put forth a petition. So the petition to increase, it's a mouthful, the petition to increase
The petition for police accountability
through transparency, that's what it is, I'm sorry. So the goals of this petition were to respond to concerns around use of force incidents, utilize knowledge and experience from Code for Asheville's members and other members of the community, to develop collaboration between fellow residents and groups, which we were able to do, and to request foundational elements to facilitate community dialogue. So what we were trying to do is really create a foundation upon which we could kind of build these policy discussions by requesting this data be made available.
And I think really importantly, what we didn't necessarily intend to at the start, but what happened was really to allow the public to participate in the process of open data. Because our city has an open data policy, it doesn't really say how a community group or a citizen can make something turn into public data, into open data. And we've figured out something that kind of works. So just a quick timeline on how all of this happened. The video of what happened to Johnny Rush was released, I think, March 1st, February 28th. Code for Asheville met. We decided to do this petition and released it to the public on March 13th. We presented it to the Public Safety Committee and then to City Council. And then nothing happened for a little bit. And people kept talking about it, kept asking, how can we move this forward? Finally, actually, a group of community members held a filibuster during the consent agenda, and it pushed City Council to vote to move this effort forward. It was a really unique situation that I hadn't seen before. And after that, the city formed a working group. So they had people from IT, people from the police department, the city manager's office, some people from HR have been at some of these meetings, and then community members, not to decide whether we're going to release the data or not, because we decided we were moving forward, but what fields do we release? How do we protect people's privacy while still providing useful information? And we've met 6 times since then working out these details.
So a big part of this petition was, working with other community groups, community members, making sure we were asking for the right things and making sure that we were doing this as a wider community effort. So the petition online had 1,000 signatures, 30 plus endorsements. You can see some of these great local organizations who were who partnered with us on this effort, and the full list is available online. But yeah, so we really wanted to make sure we were not doing this alone, and it turned out that we were able to get some really awesome support from some really great groups on this.
And I would say, I think without all of that support, this wouldn't have happened. It would have been proposed and died.
Right.
So this was a really big effort. It was an uphill battle, and we got there. So now at this point, we're going to start to go through the data sets. I just wanted to introduce them broadly that basically what we were asking for from the city was to release information that was already public records and turn it into open data. So we're not asking for anything that you couldn't already get if you did a public records request and followed up 20 times and waited for a while. And also, we wanted to make it really clear that we wanted to respect privacy and investigative concerns, not only because the state of North Carolina public records law says that you have to do that, but because some information you can get from a request could be used in more harmful ways when we turn it into a data feed and put all that information out there. So some examples are, there's no names in any of these data sets. There's no exact addresses. It's at the block level at the most specific. So we wanted this data to be published, but we wanted it to be done responsibly. And the requesting data not redacted forms. Sometimes when you ask for these data sets, what you would get back from the city would just be, here's what a use of force form looks like, when we actually wanted the data that backed it up. So, yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, so among other things, the petition requested the release of 7 different data sets. You can see them here: use of force incidents, emergency 911 call data, crime report data, arrest and citation data, citizen complaints, and traffic stop reports, and demographic information on APD officers that's since actually been expanded by the city. They are going to release demographic information for all city departments, which is kind of cool. And we're going to talk about each one of these individually as well.
Right. So the first one, which was, I think, the most important data set we wanted to see released in the context of why we did the petition, was use of force data. That data set was released in December of last year. And for each of these data sets, we're going to identify the time frame of data that's present, because that's one of the things we think more work can be done around, and which fields are included from the text of our request versus what's currently missing. So when I'm saying time frame 2018 to present, that means use of force data is released that has from the start of 2018 till now. One thing I would like to see is that we go back as far as we can until we get to where they're on paper forms. But that's a work in progress, so we're just telling you where we are today. So with use of force, I just want to highlight that we do have most of this information released that we asked for. We do not have an exact location. We have a law beat, which will give you a general area of town. And we don't know anything about the nature of call, the citation someone was charged with in an incident that led to use of force. And we also don't at this point have the gender or race of the officer, which some of those reasons are technical and some of them are that we're still working with the city to figure out how we can release this information in a way that doesn't identify either citizens or individual officers.
And I just want to note, all of these data sets, unless otherwise specified, are on the City of Asheville Open Data Portal, and if you want to find them, all of them are linked to in the data set link in each slide. And they're available as JSON endpoints. You can work with them as an API, or you can download them as a CSV as well. So the second data set is 911 emergency call data. We were requesting the call date and time, general location of call, neighborhood, nature of call / crime type, call disposition, and the case or incident ID. This was one where we had to make sure we weren't getting too specific with the location of the request for service or the emergency call. because there's personally identifying information there. As you can see here, the only thing that's missing is the neighborhood. The time frame goes from 2018 to present. We would like to get historical data going back before that, but currently that is what we have to work with.
Yeah. I just want to comment on this. This data set in particular, it's like 200,000 rows. So the challenge, use of force data, there's 20 rows that we have. So you can do analysis kind of just by looking at it. This data set is 200,000 bits of information. So to really analyze that, we have to work with the data a little bit. So, but I think this is a really interesting data set, and there's a lot of ways we could look at this. So the next one that we requested is the city. Related to crime incidents, I think I'll just describe broadly. There's really 3 data points that can happen. One is an incident or a report, which could be that something happened that could involve a person. It could be there was graffiti discovered on a wall. So crime incidents and reports are really whenever APD shows up and fills out an incident report. The city had published this data for a while. At some point, they reduced the amount of information in late 2017, which made it much less useful. We asked the city to put all of that data back on, and they did. So we now have data from 2005 to the present. The one thing we're missing here is that there's certain categories that aren't included there, and typically for good reason, because there's sensitive crime categories. And I just feel that it's very important that they tell us what is not in there, and that hasn't happened yet.
Citation and arrest data is the next one. This is different from the crime reports data in that it always involves a person who you are citing. We were looking for date, location, neighborhood, offense type, demographic information on both the subjects of the arrest and the officers. And this data, this was published and then retracted. I don't believe it's currently available on the portal, but it should be back soon at some point.
Basically worked through the process. There was a few things. With some of these data sets, after it's published, they find adjustments need to be made. But this data should be available very soon, and I think this is very valuable data for us to look at. And when it was online, it did include demographic information, which is important to do. The type of analysis like what happened in a recent Citizen Times article where they looked at resist, obstruct, or delay charges and compared it along demographic lines and found a disparity. So one of the things I would like to see this open data feed provide is the ability for that type of analysis to happen in any category without having to do a public records request and wait for it. This data set, citizen complaints, is when anyone files a formal complaint through the APD process. So this information has been released. Again, it's 2018 until the present. And they did publish all of the fields we requested, which is the data was filed, the status of the complaint, and the investigation into the complaint, and the broad and specific nature of the complaint. So this is not a huge volume of data, but one of the reasons this is really important is that we can do analysis throughout the year. This data gets published not immediately, it's on some kind of delay, but it's a lot shorter than once a year we get to see what's happening with the department. So this is a data set that I think is really important for accountability, so we can keep an eye and see if things start to happen that we should be looking at further.
Right. Well, if you make a complaint, it's nice to be able to go online and see the status of your complaint and see if it was actually logged. So, the traffic stop data. This is probably it's some of the more challenging data. You can see that we actually have 2 links here. We've had to, due to technical reasons, or not we, but the city of Asheville has had to break up this data set into two different chunks with slightly different formatting because of a system switchover. So they were able to handle that. And basically, the APD traffic stop data, it does get submitted to the state, but this data set actually includes additional information like location information that is not submitted to the State Bureau of Investigation, which is, by state law, a requirement of APD to submit all of their traffic stop data to the state. So this is, you can get all of this information from the state, but the local data set that we have actually has some really interesting information like location that can help you take that next step in kind of analyzing any kind of disparities in the numbers. So.
And I would just want to call out that there's a website called Open Data Policing that will visualize all of this data for Asheville's police department and any other department in North Carolina and a few other states. However, they go off the state data, so a potential project would be to look at our post-October 2017 data that has geographic location and do some analysis based on that. We can see patterns around where stops or searches are happening that we previously wouldn't have been able to do. This data set is still in progress as well, but I think it's really important. Occasionally APD will tell us about their struggles to recruit officers to build a force that represents the community they serve. But we kind of just get snapshots of that. We can't really look at it as data up to this point. So one of the things the city is working on is getting accurate demographic information for every city department and publishing that, which I think is really important to allow us to see are the efforts that both APD and other city departments are trying working, and being able to check in on that on a regular basis. So HR is working on this. I believe that they're updating, basically working through the entire city process, but we know that this is moving forward. And I just wanted to point out, I don't know the history on these data sets, but since in the past year, when I checked the other day, I saw APD has released some additional data sets that are interesting. It's on accidents with cars, bikes, or pedestrians, which could be really useful information for other projects. We know that Asheville has a very high rate of pedestrian injuries, accidents, and fatalities, and for bikes as well. So this data is available as well.
In addition to the data, the petition did request some documents be made public. The APD policy manual, which does kind of just outline what their policies and procedures are, which is just really important information for the public to know. Blank copies of internal report forms, how things are recorded when APD officers are making reports. It's good to know like what the fields are and things like that. Internal audit reports of body-worn cameras. The footage itself is not public, but we requested reporting on whether APD is doing audits of the body cam footage, when they're doing it.
Yeah, if I can elaborate on that. I mean, currently in North Carolina, the body cam footage law doesn't allow it to be released or viewed by the public without a court order. I think it's a bad law and should be changed, but that's where we are now. However, APD is internally supposed to be auditing their footage, and that data could be released to the public. So our working group has discussed that, and I'm not sure if progress is being made, but I think that's where I would like to see us make progress. That it's very important that if APD is doing those audits, we should know how much footage they're watching, how often they're doing it. So if those body cams are supposed to be a safeguard, we have to make sure that they're being used properly to make that happen.
And then finally, recordings of public committee meetings related to public safety or otherwise significant community interest. That is happening. Members, or I guess employees of the city manager department have started recording meetings. Our company actually volunteers to go out and record public safety, several other boards and commissions meetings from the city. And I think there is, in general, an effort to kind of bring more of these community meetings to the community over digital means like Facebook, YouTube, things like that. Sorry.
Are these documents like clearly available on the Open Data Portal, or are they somewhere else?
They're on the APD website. Okay. So there it says policies and reports, I think, and it's a full table of everything they've published to this point. So our petition also requested a few additional actions, which was accepting the recommendations of the Blue Ribbon Committee, which formed our Human Relations Commission of Asheville, of which I'm a member. Also to revisit the NAACP and Southern Coalition for Social Justice proposals for policy reforms related to traffic stops, specifically written consent and deprioritizing regulatory stops. Council, when they voted to push our open data efforts forward, approved those policy changes as well. And they're not in place yet. And I think that's something where I think we need to continue to push to hold the city and police department accountable to implement those policies. The other two items, we did request that the city adopt a comprehensive anti-retaliation policy, so when things happen and people see it, they're able to report it without fearing for their own job or safety. And also the Police Data Initiative is a nationwide effort around police data transparency, and we would like to see council direct staff more specifically to join that initiative. Some challenges to think about, just to introduce why it takes so long to release these open data sets. Do you want to talk about one of the specific challenges?
Yeah, so PII is personally identifiable information, basically things that someone could pull out of a data set and recognize you as an individual from the information without knowing your name. So, I think one thing that we run into when we're working with the city is just, kind of expressing to them that we do care about citizens' privacy, employees of the city's privacy. So, one instance would be 911 call data, which, if you look at the data, you can see it is at the block level, but there have been lots and lots of calls for varying degrees of emergencies. So if you have a domestic abuse call, a domestic violence call, you don't necessarily want that being at a specific address. So something like that is a good example. So we do it at the block level, and that helps give us what we need to do data analysis, but is not going to identify the victim of a crime. So.
And just another example for different reasons is officer demographics. We think it's really important that they do release that information. However, due to the current demographics of APD, certain combinations of race and gender might have just one person who matches that criteria. So releasing that data would be identifying, which actually makes it illegal for the city to publish that data. So this is a challenge we're still working through. One possible solution that's been identified would be to identify white or non-white rather than a specific race, or just do race and no gender. I'm just introducing this as something we're still working on. So there's some challenges in releasing this data.
So the next steps. We are going to continue participating in the APD working group. we feel great about it. The city, I think, views it as a success, and we are making progress. We are going to try to complete the release of all the requested data sets that we added to the petition. Some of them are a little more slow going than others, but we're going to keep pushing on them. We're confident we can get them all released to the specifications that we requested. We're going to request the more historical data. A lot of our data starts at 2018 due to technical limitations. We want to see that go back as far as it possibly can, because that's what makes it useful in trend analysis. We want to discuss ways that we can utilize this data effectively with other community members, with you guys, with members of city staff, because the data is a starting point. Getting it released is a great first step, but then we can do cool things with it. And then the city and the working group as a whole, we're very excited to apply the model of this working group to other open data within the city. We've been mainly looking at police crime data, but there's a ton of other data. Economic data is probably the next one that we would start looking at, so city contracts, things of that nature, because disparities don't just exist in the data we're looking at now, and the city is, they are, I think, being more proactive about getting data released by default, open by default. So.
Yeah, and I would just add on that, I think this model where we get together and talk about how to release the data has worked well, but there's lots of situations where the city commissions a report like they did with minority business contracting, and it gives us kind of the 10,000-foot view that we have a really big problem. And then what we start to hear are a lot of questions for people of, how can we see that data broken down by department so we know who is doing really well and can learn from what they're doing, or where's the biggest room for growth? And all of those questions, it takes time to figure out what data exists. Can we answer those questions, and how can we come up with some solutions from it? And really having these working group models is one of the ways we can get people in the room to talk about it, instead of people asking questions and us not knowing how to take the steps to get the answers. So what we're hoping is that open data can become a process that involves community to work together with the city to guide us towards solutions. That's it.
Is that it? There's not even a thank you slide. Wow. Well, thank you so much. Yeah.
Thank you.